Okay, welcome back to the fourth panel of the Diverse Ed Virtual 3 event. Today, we have been going for a good 3 hours now, and honestly, every minute has been absolutely fantastic. So I'd like to introduce our fourth panel of the day. So in no particular order, we have Anjum Peerbacos, who is going to be talking to us about unconscious bias. She's the head of Year 13. We have also got with us Kemi Oloyede, who is a Senko and founder of the Young Black Teacher Project, and she's going to be talking about a lived experience of prejudice. We have with us the inimitable Youlande Harrowell, who is an assistant head teacher, but also the co-founder of Mindful Equity, a fantastic organisation. And she's going to be talking about empowering BAME women in education. We have with us also Jack Bastian from Diversity Role Models, and we were due to have another speaker. We were due to have Craig Cunningham, who was going to talk about fair recruitment for all and he's an assistant associate head teacher from The Difference, but I think he's having technical difficulties. So we're going to crack on without him, and hopefully we'll get his message out in some other way, shape or form. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Anjum to talk us through her thoughts on on unconscious bias.
Good afternoon, everybody. Lovely to be here. Such an honour and privilege. I'm going to speak about unconscious bias from an anecdotal perspective because I've got a very finite amount of time. But it's something that I think that we all need to address and understand in terms of its existence, because only once we address that and its existence that we can actually address it and make change and do something to change the status quo as it is. So just anecdotally, I was coming back from a theatre trip when we were allowed to go to the theatre many moons ago on a school trip one evening, and I was coming back from the station and just walking to my car, and suddenly I can hear some footsteps behind me, and the footsteps are getting closer and louder. And I'm a relatively small person. I'm traveling on my own. It's late at night. And what's happened is that these footsteps start to become louder and closer, and I immediately start to panic. I'm immediately thinking, okay, if they want my phone or if they want my purse, whatever it is, they can just have it and they can leave me alone. You know, my safety is my paramount concern. The footsteps then sidle up towards me and behind me and then immediately next to me. And I'm absolutely panicking, heart rate's up, breathing incredibly fast. And I hear, "Oh, hi, miss, how you doing?" And it's two young men that I taught a few years ago who, I taught, and they'd obviously become young men now. They're, 20 odd years old, and they wanted to say hi and how was I doing? And they brought me to my car, and, it was fine. But immediately for me, I had my preconceived notions of what would be asked of me or why I was feeling the way that I was feeling. And it made me question what that experience did for me, and start thinking about my own unconscious bias towards men. Maybe in that context, it's quite specific. But then anecdotally, a student came up to me one day after I'd been off celebrating Eid for a day and said, "Oh, miss, you're back." I was like, "Yeah." And they're like, "Oh, how are you feeling? Are you feeling better?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm fine." And they said, "But you were away yesterday, so you must have been sick." I was like, "No, I was celebrating Eid." And my context is that I work in a Catholic boys' school in North London. And, my journey has ended me here, and I'm very fortunate for that. And I feel very, very fortunate to have had this experience. And the student's immediate assumption was that, "Oh, but you're Muslim." I said, "Yeah, a bit of a giveaway." And he was like, "But you're not like the Muslims that I see on television." And suddenly a penny dropped, because clearly the student's experience of Muslims, maybe Muslim women, had been in a preconceived notion that had arisen from his consumption and his exposure to Muslim women in the mainstream media or in print press, or what he had been exposed to. And of course, I don't hold that student's perception, I don't hold that student responsible for that perception, because that perception has come about as a culmination of that diet of what the student has been exposed to through whichever format. So it made me realise that actually we all have unconscious bias, And it's actually something that we need to address, but also need to challenge, because it comes about because of our consumption and what we are exposed to. So just in a really quick Google search, I looked up child. And when you look up the word child in Google, it's not until you get to the 5th page that there's a child of colour. And when you get to that 5th page and there's a child of colour, that child is a child in an African backdrop from some very deprived situation. So our preconceived notions come from our diet of what we consume. But as educators, I think it becomes incredibly paramount, and it should be at the forefront of our thinking. And what are we giving as a diet to our young people in front of us that's informing their opinion of the world? And we live in a world, we don't live in a town or a city or a country. We are very much a global community. So in terms of my own experience of unconscious bias, I have a lot in terms of anecdotal advice and experiences. Actually, it's for us as educators to question ourselves in what are we giving our young people in front of us to experience, which is making up their understanding of the world. So I'm just going to leave it there, and hopefully that's some food for thought this very rainy afternoon from Stanmore in North London.
Thank you, Anjum, for sharing your thoughts. And yes, it has given us food for thought. I'm going to move straight over to you, Kemi, for your experiences.
Hi, everyone. So my name is Kemi, as Benny has mentioned, and I'm the founder of the Young Black Teachers Network. So the one thing I want to focus on is why I'm so passionate about having more Black teachers in education. And I've had people, I'm not going to say attack, but they've come towards me to say, like, why is it only Black teachers you care about? And that's not the case. If we were as diverse and inclusive as we say we are, there will be no reason for the Young Black Teachers Network to exist. So the whole point of having the Young Black Teachers Network, because when I was in school, I never saw a lot of Black teachers, maybe the odd one or two here and there. And then what I noticed was that they never got past being a classroom teacher. So I thought, what is this glass ceiling that these teachers are experiencing? What is going on here? And then when I became a teacher, which was not the plan, by the way, I had no plan of ever becoming a teacher. I found the same thing again. Like, why is it that after I've been a student and I'm now a teacher myself and I'm training, I don't see any Black teachers in senior leadership positions? And that kind of worried me, because even in the cohort when I was training to be a teacher, I was the only Black person there. So I was just like, I went to school with a lot of Black people. I lived in an area where there were a lot of Black people as well. I wonder why this is just, something's just not adding up here. So after I did my teacher training, I found that I felt quite alone when certain situations would happen. And when I would try to bring it up or discuss it with people who were not Black, I'll be told, oh, you're too sensitive, you're overthinking it. So-and-so didn't mean to say something in that way, or you took it wrong. So it was always like I was doing something wrong, rather than what the person has said or done. That's not the issue. And I remember finishing my my trainee year and starting my NQT, somebody who had trained with me as well, he was white, but he came and told me, he said, oh, what did they start you on? And I said, oh, I'm starting on M2. He's like, oh, I'm starting on M5. I said, what? How does that, what do you mean? We both completed this training course together. I don't understand what's the difference between us. I'm teaching a core subject. He wasn't, but I thought, I don't know if that had something to do with it. And then he said to me by himself, I'm white and I'm a man. That's the honest truth. And I thought, wow, like, I mean, it kind of hurt, but he said what he said, and it was true. So I thought, okay, I wonder how many other Black teachers are feeling this way. And it got to a point where I just genuinely, I did not like teaching. I'll probably say I hated it. It got to a point where I hated it. So I resigned from my job without thinking of what next I'm going to do. But I just knew that if I leave my job as a teacher, what does that mean for the other Black children who saw me in the classroom, who maybe they had an experience like mine, not seeing Black teachers growing up? And I'm now going to be one of the teachers who are leaving, who's given up. And that just made me think, okay, this can't continue. I really need to find a way or find a school that I'll be happy in, right? So I started the Young Black Teachers Network because I want to ensure that other teachers who look like me, they have a safe space. They have a network and organization, not just an organization that's all about, talking. We need to make sure there's action behind what we say. So if we say we're going to support you, that's exactly what we're going to do. If we say we're going to mentor you, that's exactly what we're going to do. And we're not going to sugarcoat anything, because in the real world, it's not sugarcoated. On top of that, I work in a pupil referral unit. And for the last 3 years, 90% of my students have been Black boys. And I don't want to see any child get excluded from school. Like, let me make that very clear. But exclusions are that's a whole different conversation that will take up more than 5 minutes. But to see 90% of those faces look like mine, it just doesn't make sense when we don't even make up 90% of the population in this country. It really doesn't make any sense. So if I give up teaching, not only am I doing myself a disservice, because I said I want to be part of the change that I want to see, but I'm also doing my children a disservice. And I can't afford to do that when I feel like if things hadn't changed when I was a student and now things haven't changed again, like, where's the progress that's being made? So I want fellow Black teachers to know that there are people in their corner who look just like them, who understand. Sometimes it gets tiring having to explain everything. I don't always want to have to explain everything. Sometimes you just want someone who gets it. And it's not that I'm always looking for a solution, but sometimes you just need someone with a listening ear who cares. And also when it comes to my students as well, I want them to know that I see you. I'm in this classroom with you. I don't want you to fill up these seats, but when you're here, I will make sure you get the best education you can, because in honesty, most teachers who work in a pupil referral unit or alternative provision, they're not all qualified. So I don't want them to feel like their level of education is compromised. So that's why I'm here. That's why the Young Black Teachers Network exists, to make sure we support our fellow teachers and also our students, because we have to pass the baton on to them.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Kemi. There's lots of comments about how important it is that you stayed in the profession, and gratitude for you sharing your story. So thank you for that. Okay, moving on to Youlande. You have done quite a lot of work recently. You've got things to say. I'm going to pass over to you.
Thank you so much, Bernie, and thank you to both of you, Benny and Hannah, for creating Diverse Ed and giving us this platform to have these conversations. I'll start with the creation of Mindful Equity and the fact that I had the utmost pleasure of sharing a seat at a senior leadership table with my fellow co-founder, Aretha Banton, who has now been promoted this year to vice principal. And she's a fellow Black woman, and both of us look at each other thinking, well, how have these two extremely wonderful Black women made it to a senior leadership table to have those conversations, have a seat at the table where those decisions are being made? And to be quite frank, when we looked back at our career journeys, there was a lot of parity in the sense that we had struggled and challenged to achieve what we have done thus far. And due to the lack of uniqueness in that, when you have those conversations and those narratives with other Black women, other Asian women, or just women of color, period, it is a challenging path to make it up to leadership seats. Now, much like Kemi beautifully said, if we want to see change, particularly one thing that 2020, no matter how much we want to leave it in the past, I think the voice and the power and the drive to create things to be what we want them to be, in other words, be the change you want to see, definitely gave Aretha and I the power and the courage to create Mindful Equity UK. 3 core strands to our organisation. Number 1, it is about community. I know that throughout, and Aretha would echo this, throughout our career, it is our sense of connection and community and network that has allowed us to feel confident, to learn the lessons, to hear the wisdom of those who have stepped and walked the path that we are currently walking to get to where we are now. That in turn reinforces your confidence to step forward into leadership roles and to not be that woman who plays to the research and the narrative that says that when you see the job description and you can't tick more than 40% of what's on that job description, you're going to turn around and say, no, I don't want to apply for that role. However, your male counterpart, you, a white male, is more than confident to apply for a job, even if he can't do half of the job description. Okay, so that would be one element of it. And bringing our network together, offering that mentoring service. And we've had great success with the people that we've had the pleasure of working with. We also consult with organizations. We've got some amazing partnerships that we've fostered in only a few months of existence to essentially ensure that we're diversifying the narrative. It's really important that everyone understands that being a teacher is a social responsibility. It is not something that we can start planting Black and Asian teachers in areas in the United Kingdom that are white. That's not the answer. The answer is that we are able to have those conversations, have the confidence to have the uncomfortable conversations, and educate every young person so that we can create the society that we want to see later down the line. And by ensuring the people who have the seats at the table to have those conversations, to push forward in changing, reflecting on their organizations, we're likely to see young people grow into their confidence and be a lot more accepting and getting rid of this idea of normalizing but usualizing difference. And finally, it's encouraging there to be a lot more research. Now, we've had lots of papers. I mean, the Macpherson paper, there are articles flying left, right and centre. A lot of the research actually that we feed off of seems to be very American based. And if it is in the United Kingdom, it's usually London centric. And that again is only showing a small part of what the issue is, and it will never be the way to fix everything. We're very fortunate, those of us who live in London, because we are very diverse and we are able to see a lot of difference around us. And as you travel out of London, obviously the demographics change. And so in conclusion, it's about us as an organisation supporting educators, particularly Black and Asian women, because we know the struggle, to feel connected and be able to step into their confidence and be leaders, but more importantly, driving forward action to diversify the narrative around education.
Thank you, Youlande. Really powerful words. I just want to, on that point about usualizing, it's a term that was coined by Sue Sanders, who is the founder of Schools Out, an LGBT organisation, an absolute powerhouse. So we credit her with that word. Okay, I'm going to move over to you, Jack. We're going to have plenty of time for questions to come back to all of our guests. So over to you, Jack.
Fantastic. Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you to all the other panelists. That was really powerful and really insightful, and yeah, really inspiring calls to action. So my name's Jack Bastian, the head of education at a charity called Diversity Role Models. So we work with schools to empower them to create more LGBT inclusive learning environments. The theme of today, a fantastic set of speakers and panels going on throughout the day about belonging, and this one in particular is looking at diverse schools. And I wanted, if I can, to draw a bit of a distinction between those two things. I think the diverse schools are a reality for all of us. Whereas I think making sure that students and staff from diverse backgrounds or who have diverse identities feel like they belong, I think that's the challenge that we all as educators face. Back in November, Diversity Role Models released our Pathways to LGBT Inclusion report. So it was surveys from around 94 schools. From the secondary cohort, 14% of students identified as LGBT+. So our schools are diverse. That is the reality of those schools. But the question we have to ask is, do those students feel like they belong in those schools? So we also asked a question around, would one of your peers feel safe to come out at this school? And in secondary schools, only 27% of students thought that one of their peers would feel safe to come out at school. So we have to ask ourselves whether we can truly belong if we can't feel comfortable being ourselves and being our true selves within our school environment. So we need to try and create that culture, that ethos, and that value, those values that respect and represent those diverse communities that we serve. I know concepts like culture and school values can be quite abstract or something that's written on a mission statement and not touched for a couple of years, but in reality, it is the people that create that culture. It's people that embody that ethos and they live those values of the school, and that's how we can shift that culture to be one that is inclusive and representative. Diversity Role Models were set up about 10 years ago now. It'll be our 10th birthday in May, with the idea of bringing in LGBT+ role models who would share their personal stories in the classroom to try and embed empathy, understanding, and also to change behaviors and change the culture of that school. So in primary schools, we focus on celebrating different families, and then at secondary, looking at different identities, different forms of discrimination, but sort of underpinning both is changing behaviors and changing the culture of that school. So we've worked with 115,000 young people and also trained thousands of staff members, governors and parents and carers. And I feel really lucky to have had the privilege to stand in so many of those classrooms running those workshops, or, well, it's more likely now to be beamed in onto a projector, onto a laptop at home at the moment. But it's fantastic to be there and hear the conversations that the young people have if we create the space and allow them to reflect and have those conversations. I think our workshops kind of have, for me, a dual purpose. And one purpose is to provide sort of representation, reassurance, inspiration for those students who might be LGBT plus or questioning their identity, that 14% from our report. And I've had so many great conversations with pupils who've come up to us after a session and said, hearing a story of somebody like me has given me the confidence to be myself, or this is the first time you've talked about a family like mine in school, and that's incredible. But there's also a second purpose, and that's for that 86%, those who aren't LGBT plus. And I think it's important that they understand the role and the impact they have in creating that school culture too. I remember a session at a school over in East London, and we'd had a role model who shared a really powerful story about the impact of homophobic language. And I was wandering around as students were having discussions, and two boys, one turned to the other one and said, I'm going to use some slightly derogatory language here. I said, you know, when we call James a faggot, maybe that's not okay. And, you know, it's a little bit of a sort of slow clap moment of, yes, using that derogatory language isn't great, but having heard that personal story and been given the opportunity to reflect on it, that can change behaviors. We know that personal stories can have that really, really huge impact. You know, Kemi's story for all of us just now is incredibly powerful, and hopefully will change lots of our behaviors as well. In the 2018 referendum in Ireland on abortion, 75% of people said that they were swayed by a personal story that they'd heard either in person or in the media. After our sessions, 84% of young people anonymously say that they'd support a friend who came out. So we can see the impact it has. And, you know, if I'd been in a classroom where 84% of my peers had said that they would have supported me, I would have certainly felt more like I belonged within that environment and would have been allowed to belong as my true self. So we know that there are solutions out there. There are things that we can be doing. And it comes back to, I think, what Anjum was talking about that diet, about what, you know, students are seeing represented. In our report, we found that the schools where pupils regularly learn about LGBT plus identities, they were the schools that were most likely to have a lower level of bullying and a lower level of discriminatory language as well. That's backed up by research from the Stonewall School report. So, you know, sadly, it's only about 20% of young people say they learn about LGBT identities. So it's really important that we bring that representation into every aspect of our schools. You know, we can't change the reality, and we wouldn't want to change the reality that our schools are diverse, but what we can change is the curriculum, is the environment, and is that culture. So we can create those cultures where young people feel safe and supported and feel like they belong within our schools as well.
Lovely.
And I think that's time.
It is, yes, but there's so much to think about there, and some of the comments coming through absolutely cheering you on as you talked, so there's a lot that resonated. Because we're a speaker down, we've got a bit more time for questions and comments, so I'm going to hand over to Hannah, who will guide us through and see how we can draw this conversation out further. Thank you.
Thank you to all the speakers. Absolutely fantastic inputs, and it's really landing. It's having a lot of impact. I can see the ripples kind of like on social media right now. So Kemi, I'm going to come to you first. A straight white guy, I think, asking the question about, in addition to empowering BAME teachers, how do you suggest those inclusive allies, the non-BAME teachers, go about supporting and empowering BAME people, BAME staff, BAME students in terms of that culture?
So sorry, can I just ask the question, like, how do we kind of get allies? Is that what you meant? Just to...
Yeah. So how do the non-BAME people become part of the conversation and part of the solution?
Okay, so first of all, when you see injustices in your classroom with your students, speak up about it. Like has been said already, we do have some unconscious biases towards certain people. So you need to do your own unlearning yourself before you can even come and say, right, I want to stand in solidarity with you. Because if you haven't dealt with that within yourself, how can you call yourself an ally? So I think that's the first thing you need to do. And also, if a member of staff or a student is coming to you about something, because they might not always go to the Black teacher or the Asian teacher, they might go to a white teacher. You need to be able to, if you don't know how to answer all the questions, it's okay to say, you know, I don't understand what you're going through. I don't understand how you feel, but I want to understand and I want to support you the best way I can. If that means you need to go and get somebody else to come and help as well, that is you being an ally, because you're showing that I'm here to learn and I'm here to support you, but I also need help myself in order to help you. So I think don't shy away from really standing beside your colleagues, from standing beside your students who may not look like you. If you really are going to call yourself an ally, make sure you step up and you show up.
Thank you, Kemi. I'm going to come to you next, Anjum. So how do we get the parents on board when we're doing this work with the students in our schools about like that world vision, that global citizenship? How do we bring the parents and the carers into the conversation? Have you got any examples or any tips, please, Anjum? You need to unmute. Easily done, easily done.
So one of the things that I did with promoting or dispelling misconceptions, I think that's what I kind of try and do all day, every day in my every waking moment, just as a Muslim woman, because I'm constantly trying to fight against this negative stereotype that is being depicted on a daily basis, really, in the national press and especially in the print media. And what I did was give opportunities to not just students but staff as well, to say, actually, I'm going to do a Q&A. And I did a Q&A for an entire year group, but actually the head teacher, who was incredibly supportive of the work that I was doing, was happy to open it up to staff. And the number of staff that turned up and took part in that discussion and part in the conversation. And the premise was no question is too stupid, but I'm in a position where as an educator and as a teacher, I'm quite confident do that. I'm also quite confident in my faith to be able to take questions and answers. And I've always said, like, if there's something I don't know the answer to, I'm more than happy to go and find out for you. But it's being able to involve other stakeholders in that conversation and being able to say to them, actually, it's okay to ask. Your genuine curiosity, I would rather have that than being verbally abused when I go shopping in the supermarket, because that's what is the kind of the other side. Because if you're not asking and if you're not dispelling the ignorance around a particular community or a faith group or a different group, a different community, then what you have is the fear of the unknown. And then the reaction to fear is a lot worse than what a kid will say to me in a question. One question, do you wear your hijab when you have a shower? No, I don't. But I don't mind that question because it's an innocent question. It's come from genuine curiosity. But I do mind the antagonistic, hostile approach that I have encountered when I've been out in public. So for me, it's about involving stakeholders in every opportunity. And obviously, because I write, what I was able to do was then write about my experiences for tests and for other publications, and making that people are aware that I am able to articulate myself and be able to represent my community and myself, but I'm actually not what's being depicted on your television screens or through YouTube or whatever media forum you're currently engaged in. So I think there is work to do, but I think also we need to kind of be a driving force, and like Youlande said, like, be the change you want to see. And I strongly believe that for my kids and for the children that sit in front of me on a screen at the moment, but all day, every day.
Thank you, Anjum. Youlande, the next question is for you. How do we really make a difference to mindsets to challenge the white default positioning? How do we disrupt the white spaces in education?
Well, firstly, it's about showing up as an individual, as your whole self. Being able to do that, though, isn't easy. So if it puts a lot of emphasis and responsibility on the individual, first of all, I think, firstly, as a person, a woman of colour, for me to walk into a room which I am not the norm or I'm most certainly the only one in the room, there has to be a confidence. But on my shoulders and at my back, I have my network. I have my co-founder Aretha. I have my trainees, my mentors, all of the people in my network with me when I'm going into a room and I'm feeling. So it's about pumping yourself up. Some people talk about self-affirmations, etc. Whatever you need to do to have that confidence in the first instance. On the other side, there is also responsibility. What are those rooms when they look around and they're saying, there only are white voices in this room? How can we be talking about diversity if we haven't even got diverse voices, whether it be race, whether it be gender, whether it be sexuality, whatever the necessary diverse voices are important to ensure that we have a broad understanding. So I think it comes from both sides. One, as an individual, if you are the supposed underdog, how are you increasing your confidence? On the other side, what reflections are you doing? What actions are you taking to ensure that you're having diverse conversations, which include diverse voices?
Thank you, Youlande. It's not only who's talking, but who's doing the listening as well, I think, isn't it? It's a two-way process, this communication. Which comes to you, Jack. I mean, your framing around it being about belonging, not diversity, has really landed and resonated. How do we move the conversations forward then? How do we reframe the focus on diversity and actually open it out to this sense of creating belonging in the education system?
Yeah, I think it's not to say that the diversity element isn't important. I think it's more that and that's especially true when we're thinking about staff teams, and especially as people have highlighted on the panel, around leadership positions as well. There are problems around representation there. But in terms of that idea of belonging, I think it is about getting those values right as a school and sort of living by those values. And I think it can take a lot of work, and there can be lots of big things you can do, but there are also really small things that people can do in their day-to-day interactions with students. So we have a student voice group, so young people who sort of steer our work and sort of share their insights and help us create our content. One of the people in that group said that their maths teacher once used an example that featured two men who were a couple, and the student said that from that point on, they knew that there was at least one person at the school that they could talk to. It's that usualizing that Youlande and Sue Sanders have been, have talked about. It's little things like that can help change that culture and change that environment and identify different people, having those visible allies who are not afraid to challenge discriminatory language, who are not afraid to use different examples or to have, bring that visibility into their classrooms. I think that's really, really important. It's about not being afraid to sort of celebrate that difference as well. I think we often talk about the British values framing around things like tolerance. I think Diverse Ed do a really good job of talking about celebration rather than tolerance. It's about celebrating all of our differences and having that really at the core of the school, because the schools are already diverse institutions, and it's so important that we represent that diverse community well, and we empower absolutely everybody in that community to be themselves and to come to school and feel happy, included, and belonging.
Thank you, Jack. Back to you, Kemi. There's some curiosity about your experience in alternative provision versus your experience in mainstream. And have you seen visible role models on your SLT in your AP experience?
So since I've been in a PRU, I think the closest I've seen to having someone on SLT is myself as a Senko. But even then, there's been a bit of a challenge of being on the senior leadership team as having the title as a special educational needs coordinator. So no, I haven't seen as much difference when it comes to senior leadership from a mainstream school to an AP. However, I've seen more Black teachers since working in an alternative provision. And maybe that's because of the type of children that we do get. They want them to see people who look just like themselves in the school.
Thank you, Kemi. And it's a shame Craig's not here. So Craig is on the Difference programme. Please do look up The Difference. Kieran Gill, the CEO, is doing a brilliant job in diversifying leaders from mainstream going into AP to take that AP knowledge back to the mainstream school context. So next question for you, Youlande. What are your thoughts about how we can diversify the intake into the profession? How can we actually attract more diversity into teaching in the first place?
Oh, that's a really good question. One of my neighbours spoke to me during the very first lockdown, if we can all remember that. And she was working as a consultant for the DFE, and they were thinking about how they were going to recruit members of staff from all ethnic backgrounds, races, genders, etc., into teaching. And that in that conversation, I don't think she came out of it saying, the education department really doesn't understand what they're doing. The reason she came to that conclusion is because I said simply, when you watch these adverts, for example, that the DFE put out, why is it that the teachers of colour, just visually, on a visual perspective, why are they always the person at the board? They're never the leader. They're never the person walking around with the kids. They're never the head teacher. Why would you want to, as a a child who grew up in an African household, I'm like from Nigerian descent, your parents want you to have a particular job. You're either going to be a doctor, an accountant, etc., etc. We've heard that narrative. When you then do that, you work really hard, you get into university, you go to a Russell group, top tier, highly selective university, and then you come out and you tell your parents you want to be a teacher. The immediate perception is you aren't going to make enough money to sustain yourself, your family, and to feed back into the family community. Because of that thought process, the families themselves don't really respect the profession. And so they would much rather their child become an accountant, become a doctor, become a lawyer, because they understand those to be where the money lies. What unfortunately doesn't happen is that I think the respect that teachers had many years ago is slowly coming back as a result of the lockdowns. And so parents are starting to understand, actually, to be a teacher, this is really hard. The academic rigor that we go through to understand and unpick complex theories and apply it to children. So why does this all matter, and how does that help with diversifying? Because if the narrative around what it means to be a teacher remains the way it is, it becomes a very unattractive profession. If we actually start talking to trainees from the very beginning about what your pathway could look like, we demystify it. For example, if you look at the leadership courses that occur, they are littered with ethnic minorities, people of color, trying to learn and understand what you need to do to make the next steps into leadership, because no one's ever spoken to them about it before. Heaven forbid in line management that you'd even suggest that you're considering making a promotion, for example, because you're not someone's protege. So it goes back to, what actual career development are we offering people? How are we marketing the profession? What is the narrative around education? How can we make it more appealing for other communities?
Thank you, Youlande. And also go and look up the data, guys. Okay, the data about the number of applicants versus the number of offers is really quite shocking. I think it's like 80% of white women get an offer to teach, but only sort of like 10% of black men get an offer to teach. So we've got that compelling argument that Youlande said about the kind of the visibility of teaching in some communities, but the data is not there. It's very stark reading about some of the systemic biases actually about who's being offered those places. Anjum, back to you. How do we encourage other staff to speak up, to stand out, to be upstanders and not bystanders when they see prejudice in schools?
It's very there's a very multifaceted kind of response, because I think that it can be addressed in so many different ways and in so many different layers. So Kemi earlier on touched on, if you see an injustice, regardless of if it's between students or if it's between your colleague and a salary difference, then you stand up and you say something about it. You have a platform and you have a voice. So it's incredibly important to use it in whichever forum you see the injustice occurring. I also think that, there are injustices. I think as professionals, we see that. And what we want to be able to do is mobilize the kind of actions where we can to encourage other colleagues to take action where they feel that they can. And if they don't feel that they're enabled to do that, then reach out to somebody that can help and support that. I think one of the things about as a profession where there's discrepancy in salary and pay gap, I think that, it's absolutely right for a male colleague to say, well, actually, I want to be supported from my female colleagues. Are they being paid the same as I am? I don't think there's anything wrong with having that conversation with school leaders and school governors and saying, well, if the movie stars are doing it, I don't think teachers are any less. They should be making that stand as well. Why not? Why aren't they saying, well, actually, I want to make sure that my female counterparts are on the same salary as me? And I think that actually females should be able to say the same. Are we on the same as our male counterparts? It should be the same salary for the same work, regardless of background, heritage, and gender. So where there is injustice, I think it's incredibly important to be able to stand up. And if you can't stand up, then reach out to those that can help you stand up. And it's also about creating a culture and an ethos within a school setting where you can do that. So it has to come on every level within the student body and within the staff body and within all the stakeholders. So that would be kind of my response to enabling that, that in kind of the standing up to injustice wherever it may be taking place.
Thank you, Andrew. I'm just picking up on your comment there about like salary gaps and Kemi's earlier anecdote. I mean, as a sector, why are we so funny about talking about money? Because we're not supposed to be money motivated as a teacher, but actually the lack of transparency in the education system about pay grades, about pay promotions, is problematic in itself. If you're a leader or a governor listening, be an ally by looking at who's being paid what and close some of those gaps, because actually that's our responsibility as leaders in the system as well, to make sure that there is parity in what people are being paid. Back to you, Jack, about how do we bridge this gap? How do we close the disconnect between the lived experience of young people with diverse identities and the diet of the curriculum they actually receive? Any thoughts on that, Jack?
Yeah, I mean, I think that is a really big challenge that we have, and it's, you know, constrained by what is going to be in the exam papers and what the set curriculums are. I think relationships and sex education, the new guidance for England, you know, provides opportunities to be discussing those differences. So young people within the LGBT context will have to learn about LGBT plus identities in secondary. Primary schools will have to talk about different families. So it's about finding those opportunities where they lie. It could be looking at things like your school library, looking at what books you have on offer, and, you know, are there enough books that portray different families, that are written by, you know, people from diverse backgrounds across race, religion, sexual orientation, etc. as well? Are we bringing in, you know, looking for those opportunities? If every teacher and every leader sort of just took a little minute to think about, right, within this unit of work, is there an opportunity here to lead into a discussion on, you know, equality, on respecting our differences, and just finding those little moments where we can have that. We've got LGBT History Month coming up in February, things like Black History Month, you know, those, obviously this teaching should be happening throughout the year, but those are good starting points. They're good opportunities to really highlight and showcase that. We've made lots of our resources free on our websites. We've got a series of videos of people sharing their personal stories. So you might not have that, you know, out diversity of LGBT teachers who are willing to share their personal stories. Nobody should be forced to, you know, share their personal story as a teacher, but we've got resources that you can use to start those conversations in the classroom. So those are all available on our website, and there's so much out there. I think it's just about finding the space in the curriculum, finding those gaps, finding those opportunities, and really grasping it, and not being afraid to have that conversation. I think it can be, there's often a fear of getting things wrong when we're talking about diversity, when we're talking about sexual orientation, for example. Nobody wants to say the wrong thing, but actually just opening up the space for those young people to have that conversation and to not be afraid to ask any questions, as Anjum was saying with her example. I think that's so important. It gives young people the opportunity to realize it's nothing to be afraid of to have these conversations. It's actually really important for the community to be able to have those uncomfortable and difficult conversations together. So yeah, grasp the nettle. Don't be afraid to take that opportunity wherever you find it in the curriculum or in school life.
Okay, thank you so much to all of you for sharing your thoughts. I think it's worth leaving our listeners and our viewers with just a kind of one sentence takeaway. You know, if there's one thing that you really want to feel like, you know, you've said and it's been heard today, what would it be? Can I start with you, Anjum? What's your one takeaway for people today?
As educators, we are huge influencers in the young people that we encounter every day. And I think for every lesson that you teach, for every resource that you make, for every worksheet that you create, for every PowerPoint that you use, please think about the diet that you are exposing your young people to, because it will make up their understanding of the wider world. And that would be my one takeaway from the talk that we've been having this morning.
Thank you, Anjum. Okay, over to you, Kemi. What's your one takeaway in a sentence?
Show up, be seen, be heard, and don't be afraid.
Perfectly put. I mean, you can't get more concise than that, so well done. Thank you. And over to you, Youlande. What's your one takeaway?
Oh, Benny, you put the gauntlet down. Mine is teaching is a social responsibility. If every stakeholder remembers that, education will be a very different landscape.
Absolutely agreed. There's a lot of cheering going on in the background there. And then over to you, Jack. What's your one takeaway for today?
Yeah, I think mine would be that diversity is a reality, but ensuring that every young person belongs in our school is a challenge, and it'll take time, but each small step will make a difference to those young people's lives. So don't be afraid to start that journey.
Love it. And that word belonging is ringing out loud and clear. Hannah, what about you? What's your one takeaway from this session?
Not my word. Someone put this into the comments. I love this sentence. Think global, act local. And Anjum, that was when you were talking. And just another very short statement there for us to really live by. Benny, what's yours?
My goodness, I feel like I don't want to do anybody any injustices. For me, I think the important thing here is that the asking of the questions and the having the difficult conversations needs to happen, and that means not just in terms of with students, but between ourselves, with our colleagues, and the more we're talking about belonging and what that looks like for staff and students, the more powerful social leverage we have.
So can we just remind you all that normally we finish at 1 o'clock. Today we're going till 2 because Phoenix Education are curating and co-hosting the youth panel between 1 and 1:45. Please come back. If you were impressed by Dylan and Philip earlier on, we have got 5 very feisty young women who are going to really put rockets up backsides about what we can all do with everything we've heard from today. So thank you to the panel. Go and have a break. See you all in 15 minutes time.